Another day, another macOS install. But today's video is going to be extra awesome because we're going to be working on the Mac Pro. And not only that, we're going to be dual booting macOS. I know, it sounds insane, but don't panic. Everything is under control here. We're just going to make the Mac Pro even better than how it is right now. It currently has macOS Lion. So what we're going to do is we're going to reinstall macOS Lion. But this time, the main boot drive will also have a second partition for macOS Snow Leopard. Now, even though I have a physical copy of Snow Leopard, I really haven't used this installer DVD. I do have it physically backed up on the Optiplex server, but what better system to test this out with than the Mac Pro? I know, awesome keyboard layout, right? It's kind of like with the controller where you have two analog sticks, except for the fact that it's nothing like this and it probably looks ridiculous. But you know what? It works surprisingly well considering we have two desktops. So why exactly are we resetting macOS on the Mac Pro? Doesn't Lion work fine as is? Well, it does, but lately I've been having some weird graphical issues because right now this is not making full use of the Dell display. Like, this entire section here is just empty. This is not running at its native resolution, and I've also been having some problems with the second display output. Now, this right here is not the second display. This is actually the Optiplex here. But my best guess is that ever since I tried testing out the GT730 inside this system to make sure it would actually run under macOS Lion, which it does, the Mac Pro is now acting a bit weird. I'm not entirely sure if this is because of different PCIe lane configurations or potentially some kind of weird driver issue. But you know what? I don't care enough to fix it because I might as well just reinstall macOS. I've transferred everything over onto this machine, which is acting as the macOS server. And this also means that I freed up a lot of space on the boot drive. And as for other important content, such as iTunes, well, it's on the secondary iTunes media drive, which I can just easily remove. So I just need to open this up, remove that hard drive, and I know that all that data will be safe because it's physically on a second hard drive. I thought it would be really cool to still have macOS Lion for iTunes compatibility and some other applications, but to also make use of the hard drive with a secondary partition and install macOS Snow Leopard to have alongside Lion. Now, if the Mac Pro was the only system with everything on it, then I probably would try to see what's causing that issue, but we have this system right here, which, apart from it being a Macintosh, is completely identical in terms of it running the same exact up-to-date version of Lion. The Macintosh itself is a more recent addition to the setup, but with everything actually configured the way it is right now, it'll be super convenient because once we have macOS reinstalled on the Mac Pro, all we have to do is connect it up to this machine, drag and drop all the applications onto the Mac Pro itself, and it'll be as if we never reinstalled macOS because, well, we have everything on this machine ready to go. Basically, I'm just taking the time that would otherwise be spent on troubleshooting this install and redirecting it to dual boot the system. As for installing even more copies of macOS onto this machine, such as Leopard or even Tiger, because this is of course a 1,1, that would be really cool to do in the future, but considering the boot drive only has 250 gigabytes, I think that's something we can do once we install even more hard drives inside the system. We're only making use of the first two drive bays. These two are completely empty, so there's definitely a lot more potential within the 1,1. Obviously, for Snow Leopard, we have the physical installer, and this is even a new up-to-date version, 10.6.3. But after we're done pretending like it's 2009, we're going to have to run software update to get this up to 10.6.8. As for macOS Lion, I used to have it on this USB stick, but since then, I've actually installed 10.9 and 10.10 onto this. Not really helpful if you're going to reinstall 10.7. But fortunately, we have a spare partition which is not being used, and to install it, we're going to be using the Lion Macintosh. Because we have this awesome file server drive here, we have a variety of macOS installers just ready to go. So all we have to do is open it up within Disk Utility, select our untitled drive, click on Restore. The source file is, of course, install macOS 10. Our destination is untitled. And just like that, we're going to have a macOS installer ready to go, is what I would have said. But the thing is, it's been a minute since I made a macOS installer, and even though I did restore the DMG onto the flash drive, we don't have it here at the startup options. So we need to actually install the application itself and then take the install ESD, restore it onto the flash drive. So I'm going to have to do this process again, but fortunately it doesn't take that much time. Now I would have done this on the Optiplex, but for some reason it did not want to open this up. So we're just going to click on continue here, click on install. Maybe it didn't open up because it's a Macintosh, but fortunately we still have the Mac itself, you know, still in a usable state. Well, at least this actually worked, so we can close out of that. Now that the installer actually works, we need to go into the package contents, and within here go into shared support, and this is what we want to restore onto the flash drive. So we just need to go into disk utility, select our partition that doesn't work at the moment. The source will be install ESD, and as we still have this installer here on the Mac Pro, we're going to transfer this over to the Optiplex to have it as a backup because, well, it's nice to have the install DMG, but it's also nice to have this right alongside it. So now this is also backed up onto the Macintosh here, and even though it cannot be used on the Macintosh, it doesn't really matter because it's running Lion in the first place. Somehow I still managed to completely mess this up because I needed to restore this, not the DMG, so I have to do this again. So the source needs to be that, destination needs to be that, and restore it again because clearly I need to make more macOS installers more often. Or maybe I should just have more USB flash drives. At the very least, though, with this method, you don't have to deal with internet nonsense because it's all locally stored on the system itself. So here is the new macOS Lion installer on the USB flash drive. To make sure we don't have any install problems, we're going to plug this directly into the front USB port. And we also need to remove this hard drive here with our iTunes content. And just like that, all our data is now safe. Even though at this point I've installed many older copies of macOS, it's always awesome to see this older setup page. And more importantly, the second display actually works now. Of course, before installation here, we have to go into disk utility, and initially I thought about giving Lion 150 gigabytes, and the remaining 100 would be for Snow Leopard, but considering we have pretty much everything stored on either the server or the iTunes media drive, I think it actually makes more sense to split this up evenly because 125 gigabytes is still plenty for applications and things like that on the actual boot drive. So we have Macintosh HD 10.7.5 and Macintosh HD 10.6.8. Pretty self-explanatory, Macintosh HD plus whatever version it's going to be running on. And through the magic of disk utility, one hard drive becomes two. Now the reason why the first one is 10.7 is because that'll still be the main version that I use more often, mainly because of iTunes and other applications. But it should also switch between whichever one is the main boot drive. So if we're on Snow Leopard, it'll be listed first because, well, that's the main boot device, and the other one is seen as a secondary partition. At least that's how it displays on the G5 with all of its partitions. So you would think that it does the same thing, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see once we have macOS installed. Back at the utilities page here, we just click on reinstall macOS. Click on continue. Of course we read this entire thing, so we're just gonna click on this, and of course we just need to select our proper drive. The best part about this is that we don't have to do any post modification extensions or things like that because it's not a Macintosh, it's a real Mac. You know, sometimes I'll see how a version like 10.7 here is regarded as too new for anything retro, but too old for anything useful. If that's the case, then why do I keep installing it? Just another day at the office here with macOS. We'll click on continue. Obviously it's a fresh copy. We can easily skip this part right here. And of course it's time for the Mac Pro account. Now it'll still be the same like before, we're just going to call it Mac Pro. And now, just like we started using the Mac Pro, we'll be back at the desktop. And of course the classic iCloud message pops up here. And now I have to configure everything because, well, yeah, it's a fresh copy. And before we move over to Snow Leopard, we will get this up to date with software update. Now I know we've seen a lot of software update in the past, so for Lion specifically, I'll do most of it off camera. But when it comes to Snow Leopard, that'll be really awesome to see because we also have the older style of Aqua, but we'll get to that once we actually have a desktop for Snow Leopard. And of course we have updates available. There's our classic version of iTunes here. Oh yeah, we also need to go into displays here. and fix the arrangement because it is like that. But now this actually works again. With Lion now up to date, we can move on to Snow Leopard. With the magic of optical media, we're going to have Snow Leopard up and running in no time. You really just don't see anything like this anymore. It's unfortunate, but at least we can always use these older versions. And here we have the startup disk section. All we have to do is select the DVD, and just like that, we're going to restart into Snow Leopard. So we do have an Apple logo, and I can definitely hear that optical drive, but that just means that it's actually working. Comparing this to the Lion installer, there's a decent amount of similarities, but obviously it's also pretty different because this is actually closer to macOS Leopard compared to Lion. We have the background here, and we also have older elements of Aqua. Everything about this is just Aqua, and it's fantastic. You can really tell that this installer has elements which more closely resembles Leopard and even Tiger. If we go into disk utility, you can see that it actually looks pretty much identical to Lion because, for the most part, it is. It's the same between Leopard, Snow Leopard, Lion, Mountain Lion. There's also more releases where it looks like this, but then later on, they actually changed it to a newer version. I'll always continue to use this one though because it's a fantastic utility to have. Another awesome element about Snow Leopard here are things like the navigation bar. In macOS Lion, they changed it to a more flat design, but this one still retains the awesome blue aqua color. So of course we'll continue here, and we're going to install it on 10.6.8, or at least that's what it's going to be once we completely update it. And in terms of the customize options, Snow Leopard does of course have Rosetta, which is what we're going to install because, I mean, you might as well. We have early Intel and PowerPC Max here at the setup, and I actually did not know that QuickTime 7 was an optional install. I saw that in the information. This one actually is the first version to have QuickTime 10, and as for all the extras here, I'm going to select it as is because, I mean, we do have space available, so why not? So it'll still take a while. This is obviously from a DVD and not a USB drive, but in the past when I've installed Leopard on the G5, it was actually a pretty reasonable install. Like, it did not take that much time considering it's an optical media install. So this says around 31 minutes. Honestly, that's not too bad. So it's been around 15 minutes, and here you can see that there's 15 minutes remaining. So this indicator is actually pretty accurate. And there it is. Snow Leopard was the last one to have an intro video, so this is really awesome to see. Unfortunately, I can't play the audio because of copyright, but it's still really cool. In just a few steps, you can register and set up your Mac. You can also sign up for a MobileMe subscription, Apple's premium internet service which lets you easily share photos and files online, create a website, sync important information, and more. Now that's a fantastic advertisement for MobileMe, but the problem is that it doesn't exist anymore. It was replaced with iCloud, which is still around to this day. Now this is the content that we all want to see. A setup process with Aqua. Do you already own a Mac? Why yes. Yes I do. The cool part about Migration Assistant is that you can also use this on PowerPC era hardware, which is awesome. But of course, this is supposed to be a fresh install, so we'll just click on Continue. Before iCloud, you could actually make an email address with a .Mac or a MobileMe account. If you still have one of those nowadays, that is simply awesome. For now, though, we're just going to do a Command Q skip action out of here, and we're going to make the account for Snow Leopard. We're going to have the same account name just like with the Lion install, because when we eventually connect this system up to the Optiplex server, I can use the same Mac Pro account, and of course, the most important step here is to enjoy your Apple computer. So what if it's a Mac Pro from 2006 and it's considered obsolete? Old Mac OS running on Aqua. Now this is fantastic. So with the installation out of the way, we can put this back in the box and run software update. And I guess we should also configure this because we want to see the hard drives on the desktop. So we have iLife support, an update to Airport Utility, obviously 10.6.8, and this is actually an update to iTunes 10. So this copy of iTunes is iTunes 9. iTunes 9 is actually very similar to iTunes 10, at least visually here, because this same page is also within iTunes 10, but I'm pretty sure once we update this, it'll also bring us up to iTunes 11, which is the latest that can run on Snow Leopard. Even though old iTunes is awesome, it's even more awesome when you can use it on PowerPC hardware. And here you can see that 10.6.8 is actually the first hard drive here, so it will automatically configure this depending on which version of the operating system we're using. So that's awesome to see. Let's go ahead and install all of this. So visually, it is similar to how macOS Lion does its system updates, but of course we actually have the background here instead of the linen background. Back at the desktop here, you can tell that it has updated because we now have a newer version of iTunes, indicated by the iTunes 10 icon, and I'm pretty sure we're going to have even more updates here. And I guess we should also take a look at about this Mac. It is now updated to 10.6.8, and as for the updates, we actually have a decent amount. So we have a newer version of Safari, we have iTunes 11, we have Mac App Store update, which is not going to do anything because it doesn't work in the first place, but we're still going to go ahead and install these. Oh no! Anyways, let's run software update again. And apart from this, we are actually up to date. So if we open up iTunes here, we can see that we have the newer icon for iTunes 11, specifically 11.4. I guess we now have a dual booted Mac. So if we go into System Preferences and we go into Startup Disk, we can see that we have Snow Leopard and Lion. For some reason, this actually defaulted to 1280 by 800, but we're going to change this to the native resolution of the display, and that is looking a lot better. Like, this is how it's supposed to be. There's a lot of similarities between the two. There's also a pretty big difference between things like the Finder itself. You can see that this has more elements from macOS Leopard, and this is, well, macOS Lion. And you can really tell here with things like the navigation bar, this is not Aqua. Meanwhile, this is. We now have a dual booted system with up-to-date versions of Snow Leopard and Lion, but what do we do now? Well, we gotta reinstall the iTunes media drive because, well, how else are we gonna listen to iTunes? I was just about to power down the system when I saw this. We have front row. It is Snow Leopard after all. It's also really cool to see the extra Rosetta option here because that's obviously something that we don't have in macOS Lion. With this one easy step, you can make your Macintosh into an Apple TV. It's like magic! Newer Macs might be faster, more efficient, and obviously quieter, but can your Macintosh do this? Well, chances are if you're using another old Mac, it probably can, or if you have a newer one, you could also use a Thunderbolt dock for external storage. But personally, I like using random hard drives that I took out of other PC systems because that's the best way to store your files on macOS. We can finally make use of the boot menu option here because we have multiple macOS installs. iTunes is back. We have our second hard drive here on the desktop, and as for iTunes itself, we just need to hold down Option so we can select our library. Now, it's very cool that iTunes natively supports this, but we also have a very cool accessory for iTunes located on the Optiplex server. This is a great opportunity to try out the server connection, and we already have a Mac Pro login because I already set this up on the Macintosh. And just like that, we're connected as Mac Pro. All we have to do is go into Applications, go up to Bowtie. Bowtie 1.5 is the latest. Copy this over. Go into Applications. We can easily access the server to transfer over any application that we might need on the Mac Pro. And just like that, we have Bowtie. So it's basically, I guess, kind of like this, but there's also customizability options, there's themes, there's a lot of cool things you can do with this. This is mainly just like the default theme here. It's a very cool application, and I believe it still works even in modern macOS. But if we skip the track here, you can still have iTunes opened up as a large window and have this nice widget off to the side. I consider it basically an essential at this point. Now, this video actually took some time to record because, believe it or not, installing macOS requires you to wait because you're installing macOS. Crazy, I know, but I'm really happy with how this system turned out because we have a fresh copy of Lion, a fresh copy of Snow Leopard, and we can easily set up the systems here with our Optiplex server because we have all the applications on here. All we have to do is drag and drop them just like with Bowtie. Not to mention, because we also have iTunes on that second hard drive, it was literally just a plug and play solution. So I don't expect it to be exactly identical like before, but it'll still be a little similar because, well, I actually know what I use on the system in the first place. But once we have that set up, I'm going to spend more time with Snow Leopard, try to configure that as well, get some more applications, and even though the server has a lot of cool applications, it doesn't have everything. So I'm probably going to spend even more time adding more things onto the server, so that way we can use it with more Mac systems. Did you know that server can do this? Now is that cool or what? All we have to do is copy this onto the desktop. And just like that, we can easily install this application on the Mac Pro without having to download it. Going into System Preferences, we will have it down here. And we just need to select this to display things like the CPU. BG's 2, and just like that we can eject this out of the system, or at least the DMG, and then we can move this to the trash because we still have it on the server itself. So it doesn't take up space on the Mac Pro, it's all actually organized the way it should be. It's one thing to actually upgrade a setup like this, but it's another when you can actually make use of it because honestly it's kind of like early macOS magic. It just works. If you enjoyed today's video, then consider leaving a thumbs up, and if you want to see even more awesome content about old Macs, old PCs, old hi-fi, and more, then consider subscribing. But for now, as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.